The air on the desolate moon of Zytherion crackled with tension. The battlefield was a wasteland, littered with the remnants of both alien technology and human machinery. Smoke curled into the sky like phantom tendrils, and the silence that followed the last explosion felt heavier than any sound could ever be. Captain Theo Wren, a seasoned soldier from Earth's Interstellar Defense Force, stood amidst the chaos, his breath ragged but steady. His armor bore the scars of countless skirmishes, its once glossy surface now scratched and scorched. Across from him stood an imposing figure, Commander Vera Kale, leader of the Zytherian warrior caste. She was everything stories had whispered about, tall, muscular yet graceful, her skin shimmering faintly under the dim light of Zytherion's twin suns. Her sharp angular features were framed by long strands of silvery hair that seemed to defy gravity, floating slightly as if caught in an invisible breeze. Her eyes glowed a deep violet, shifting hues like liquid amethysts whenever she moved. In one hand, she held a blade forged from some kind of crystalline material, its edge gleaming ominously even in the low light. Vera stepped closer, her movements deliberate and calculated, each step resonating like thunder against the barren ground. Theo didn't flinch. Instead, he adjusted his grip on his plasma rifle, though it was clear he wouldn't have time to fire before her knife found its mark. There was no fear in his stance, only defiance, a stubborn refusal to back down even when faced with certain death. "So," Vera said, her voice smooth yet edged with menace, "any last words, human?" Her question hung in the air, heavy with mockery. It wasn't uncommon for prisoners or defeated foes to beg for mercy, plead for their lives, or spout meaningless bravado. But Theo surprised her. A smirk tugged at the corner of his lips, and despite the knife pointed directly at his throat, he chuckled softly. "Yeah," he replied, his tone casual, almost playful. "You're holding that knife wrong." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then Vera tilted her head, curiosity flickering across her otherwise stoic expression. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "You heard me," Theo continued, his smirk widening. "That grip? Amateur hour. You might want to reconsider your training methods." If looks could kill, Theo would have been reduced to ash right then and there. Vera narrowed her glowing eyes, studying him intently. Most humans she'd encountered either cowered or screamed in terror when confronted with her blade. This insolent creature dared to critique her technique? "I've killed more beings than you can count, human," she hissed, pressing the tip of her knife closer to his throat. "And I assure you, my methods are flawless." "Oh, I don't doubt that," Theo shot back, leaning forward slightly, not out of aggression, but as if sharing a secret. "But flawless doesn't mean perfect. Trust me, I've seen better fighters choke because they didn't adapt." Vera hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. That hesitation was all Theo needed. With a swift motion, he twisted his body, using the momentum to knock her arm aside while simultaneously grabbing her wrist. The knife clattered to the ground, skittering away across the rocky terrain. Before she could react, he swept his leg behind hers, sending her sprawling onto her back. For a brief moment, shock registered on Vera's face, a rare vulnerability that made Theo pause. He could end this right now. He had the upper hand. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she looked up at him, not with fear or anger, but with something akin to respect? Or perhaps it was the realization that killing her here wouldn't solve anything. Whatever it was, Theo stepped back, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. "See what I mean?" he said, offering her a lopsided grin. "Adaptation is key." Vera stared at him, her chest rising and falling rapidly as she processed what had just happened. Slowly, she rose to her feet, brushing off imaginary dust from her uniform. For a warrior who prided herself on being unbeatable, this humiliation burned like acid. Yet, strangely, she found herself intrigued. No one had ever disarmed her before. And certainly no human had dared to mock her skills, or teach her a lesson, while staring down the barrel of certain death. "Your name," she demanded, her voice clipped but tinged with something unfamiliar. "Curiosity? Admiration?" She wasn't sure. "Theo Wren," he replied, still grinning. "And you?" "Vera Kale," she answered automatically, her pride warring with her growing fascination. "Why didn't you kill me?" Theo shrugged. "Because killing you wouldn't change anything. We're stuck here, aren't we? Two sides of the same war. Killing each other won't fix whatever mess started this whole thing." Vera frowned, her mind racing. She had spent her entire life following orders, fighting battles, and eliminating threats without question. Yet here was this human, challenging everything she thought she knew about warfare, and about herself. Against her better judgment, she found herself listening. As the smoke cleared and the adrenaline began to fade, Theo and Vera found themselves seated across from each other on a jagged rock formation, the remnants of their respective forces scattered around them. Neither spoke for a long moment, the weight of their shared predicament settling between them like an unspoken truce. Finally, Theo broke the silence. So he began, leaning back casually despite the tension still vibrating in the air. "What's your deal, Commander? Why does someone like you fight wars for fun?" Vera raised an eyebrow, her violet eyes narrowing slightly. "Fun?" she echoed, her tone dripping with disdain. "This is not a game, human. My people do not fight for amusement." "Right, sorry," Theo said quickly, holding up his hands in mock surrender. "I meant, why do you fight at all? Not like you're short on resources or anything. Your ships look fancy enough to buy half the galaxy." Vera's lips twitched into what might have been the beginnings of a smile, or possibly a grimace. "Our reasons are our own," she replied cryptically. "Suffice it to say, we fight to protect what is ours. Unlike your kind, who seem intent on taking what belongs to others." Theo let out a low whistle, shaking his head. "Ouch. Harsh. But hey, fair point. Humans have had their share of questionable decisions." He paused, his expression turning thoughtful. "Still, it feels like there's more to it than that. You strike me as someone who doesn't follow orders blindly." Her gaze sharpened, and for a moment, Theo wondered if he'd overstepped. But then she sighed, a sound so soft it almost blended with the wind. "Perhaps," she admitted reluctantly. "But questioning orders does not make one immune to consequences." "Consequences, huh?" Theo mused, scratching the back of his neck. "Sounds like you've got quite the story yourself. Care to share?" Vera hesitated, her fingers absently tracing the edge of her fallen knife where it lay nearby. "Not particularly," she said finally, though her voice lacked its usual bite. "It is not a tale meant for human ears." "Fair enough," Theo shrugged, unperturbed by her deflection. "But since we're swapping war stories, let me tell you about the time I accidentally blew up my commanding officer's favorite shuttle." Vera blinked, clearly caught off guard. "You did what?" "Oh yeah," Theo grinned, leaning forward conspiratorially. "It was supposed to be a routine maintenance check. Turns out, routine doesn't mix well with caffeine jitters and faulty wiring. Long story short, boom. No casualties, thankfully, but Colonel Hayes gave me the lecture of a lifetime. Said I owed him 20 years of service just to pay for the repairs." Despite herself, Vera chuckled, a rich melodic sound that startled even her. "Your species is truly bizarre," she remarked, shaking her head. "Most warriors would consider such incompetence grounds for execution." "Nah, we prefer creative punishment," Theo quipped, his grin widening. "Besides, mistakes happen. Even to big bad aliens like you." At that, Vera's amusement faded, replaced by a flicker of something darker. "Do not presume to understand us," she warned, her tone colder now. "We are not like your kind." "Maybe not," Theo conceded, sobering slightly. "But you're not exactly boring either. And hey, if we survive this mess, maybe you'll let me buy you a drink sometime. Assuming your people haven't outlawed alcohol too." To his surprise, Vera didn't immediately shut him down. Instead, she regarded him with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. "A drink?" she repeated, as if testing the word. "What purpose would that serve?" "Purpose?" Theo laughed, throwing his arms wide. "No purpose. That's the beauty of it. Sometimes you just need to sit back, relax, and enjoy the little things. Like good company, or bad jokes." Vera opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, a distant rumble interrupted them. Both turned sharply toward the horizon, where a fleet of Zytherian dropships was descending rapidly, their sleek forms cutting through the atmosphere like blades. Moments later, a squadron of human gunships roared overhead, their engines screaming defiance. "Well," Theo muttered, standing abruptly and reaching for his rifle, "looks like the party's starting again. Guess we'll have to table the drinking plans for later." Vera retrieved her knife, rising to her full height with the grace of a predator preparing to strike. "Indeed," she said, her voice hardening once more. "But know this, Theo Ren, if we meet again on the battlefield, I will not hesitate to end you." "Wouldn't expect anything less," Theo replied, flashing her a wink before sprinting toward the nearest cover. As he disappeared into the chaos, Vera lingered for a heartbeat longer, watching the space where he had stood. For reasons she couldn't quite explain, the thought of facing him again filled her with a strange sense of anticipation. The clash erupted with a ferocity that shook the very ground beneath their feet. Plasma bolts streaked through the air like angry comets, illuminating the battlefield in bursts of electric blue and fiery orange. Theo ducked behind a crumbling wall, narrowly avoiding a blast that sent shards of rock flying in every direction. His heart pounded in his chest, but his focus remained razor-sharp. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Vera darting between cover points, her movements fluid and precise, like a dancer choreographed to the rhythm of destruction. "Damn it," Theo muttered under his breath, reloading his weapon. "She's fast." As if hearing him, Vera glanced in his direction, her glowing eyes locking onto his position. For a split second, their gazes met, and Theo swore he saw a flicker of challenge in her expression, a dare to keep up. Then she was gone, weaving through the chaos with an agility that left even the most seasoned soldiers struggling to track her. Meanwhile, the battlefield had devolved into utter pandemonium. Human troopers shouted orders over the din of explosions, their voices barely audible above the cacophony. Zytherian warriors charged forward in tight formations, their crystalline weapons humming with energy as they unleashed devastating volleys. The air crackled with heat and static electricity, making it hard to breathe, let alone think clearly. Amidst the mayhem, Theo spotted Lieutenant Mara Reyes, one of his closest comrades, pinned down behind an overturned vehicle. Her helmet was cracked, and blood trickled down her temple, but she was still firing back with unwavering determination. "Reyes!" he yelled, gesturing wildly for her to fall back. She nodded, scrambling to her feet and sprinting toward him, dodging enemy fire with practiced ease. "You okay?" Theo asked as she slid into cover beside him, breathing heavily. "Define okay," she shot back, wiping sweat from her brow. "Who the hell are those guys? They're tearing through us like paper." "They're Zytherians," Theo explained grimly. "Elite warriors. If we don't regroup soon, we're done for." Before Reyes could respond, a deafening roar split the air. Both turned to see a massive Zytherian mech stomping into view, its armored bulk shaking the ground with every step. Its cannons swiveled ominously, targeting clusters of human soldiers with clinical precision. "Oh, come on," Theo exclaimed, throwing up his hands in exasperation. "Is nothing simple anymore?" Reyes groaned, slumping against the wall. "Great. Just great. What's next? Giant space spiders." "Don't tempt fate," Theo warned, though his tone was light. Despite the dire situation, he couldn't help but feel a spark of camaraderie with Reyes. Humor, even in the darkest moments, was their lifeline, a way to remind themselves they were still human, still alive. Suddenly, a blur of motion caught Theo's attention. It was Vera, leaping onto the mech's shoulder with breathtaking agility. In one swift motion, she plunged her crystalline knife into a weak point near the cockpit, triggering a cascade of sparks. The mech staggered, its systems faltering as alarms blared inside. With another graceful leap, Vera landed safely on the ground, rolling to absorb the impact. "Did you see that?" Reyes gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. She took out a mech. By herself." "Yeah," Theo murmured, watching as Vera signaled her troops to press the advantage. "Told you she was something else." For a moment, the tide of battle shifted. The Zytherians surged forward, emboldened by Vera's display of skill. Human forces scrambled to hold their ground, but the momentum was slipping away. Theo clenched his jaw, knowing they couldn't afford to lose this fight, not here, not now. "All right, listen up," he barked, addressing the remaining soldiers around him. "We need to flank them. Hit their supply lines and cut off reinforcements. Reyes, take point. I'll cover you." "You got it, boss," Reyes replied, already moving into position. Together, they rallied the surviving troops, launching a desperate counterattack. Bullets whizzed past Theo's head as he advanced, his rifle blazing. Each step felt heavier than the last, but he pushed through, driven by sheer willpower. On the opposite side of the battlefield, Vera noticed the shift in strategy. Her lips curled into a predatory smile. These humans, she realized, were far more resilient than she'd given them credit for. Even Theo, whose antics she found infuriatingly charming, was proving to be a formidable opponent. "Fall back," she commanded her warriors, her voice carrying authority even over the chaos. "Regroup and prepare for Phase 2. Her subordinates obeyed without question, retreating in an orderly fashion while maintaining suppressive fire. As the Zytherians withdrew, Theo allowed himself a brief moment of relief. They had bought themselves some time, but at what cost? Wiping soot from his face, Theo surveyed the damage. Bodies lay strewn across the field, both human and Zytherian alike. The stench of burnt metal and charred flesh filled the air, a grim reminder of the price of war. Reyes approached, her expression grim. "We lost too many," she said quietly, her voice trembling with emotion. "Too damn many." "I know," Theo replied, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "But we're still standing. That counts for something." As the survivors tended to the wounded and fortified their positions, Theo found himself glancing toward the horizon, where the Zytherians had vanished. Somewhere out there, Vera was planning her next move. And despite everything, he couldn't shake the feeling that their fates were intertwined in ways neither of them fully understood. When the dust settled and the immediate threat receded, Theo found himself wandering the outskirts of the battlefield, seeking solace in the eerie quiet that followed such devastation. The stars above twinkled indifferently, casting a pale glow over the wreckage. It was here, amidst the ruins, that he stumbled upon an unexpected sight: a lone Zytherian scout, injured and leaning heavily against a shattered piece of machinery. The alien's armor was dented, its usually pristine surface marred by scorch marks and dirt. Blood, a deep indigo hue, seeped from a wound on its side. Theo froze, his instinct screaming at him to act, to eliminate the threat. But something about the creature's posture, its labored breathing, struck a chord within him. Lowering his weapon slightly, he approached cautiously. "Hey," he called out softly, ensuring his voice carried no malice. "You all right?" The Zytherian lifted its head, revealing eyes that mirrored Vera's, violet pools shimmering with pain and defiance. It attempted to stand, clutching a small ornate device in its hand. Theo recognized it instantly. It was a communication beacon, likely used to call for reinforcements. He raised his rifle slightly, indicating the device. "Drop it," he ordered gently, his tone firm yet devoid of hostility. Instead of complying, the Zytherian pressed the device closer to its chest, whispering something in its native tongue. Theo hesitated, torn between duty and compassion. Finally, he lowered his weapon completely, taking a cautious step forward. "I'm not going to hurt you," he assured, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "Let me help." The Zytherian regarded him with suspicion, its grip on the beacon tightening. Then, with a sudden burst of strength, it activated the device, a high-pitched whine filling the air. Theo cursed under his breath, expecting a swarm of enemies to descend upon them. Instead, a holographic image flickered to life above the beacon, a young Zytherian child, smiling brightly despite the static interference. The sight hit Theo like a punch to the gut. This wasn't a soldier calling for backup, it was a parent trying to send a message home. The realization softened his resolve, and he knelt beside the injured alien, ignoring the potential danger. "Who are they?" he asked softly, nodding toward the hologram. "Family." The Zytherian nodded weakly, its fierce demeanor crumbling as it succumbed to exhaustion. Theo tore a strip of fabric from his uniform, fashioning a makeshift bandage to staunch the bleeding. As he worked, memories flooded his mind, images of his own family, fragmented and distant after years of war. His father, a retired colonel, had always urged him to find meaning beyond conflict. His mother, a pacifist artist, had begged him to choose a different path. And then there was Lila, his younger sister, whose letters he rarely answered because he feared her disappointment. "You're fighting for them, aren't you?" Theo murmured, more to himself than to the alien. "Just like me." The Zytherian's eyes fluttered closed, its breathing growing shallow. Theo sat back on his heels, overwhelmed by the weight of connection. Here in this desolate place, he saw not an enemy but a reflection of his own struggles, a being caught between duty and love, sacrifice and survival. Unbeknownst to Theo, Vera observed the scene from afar, hidden among the shadows of the ruins. Her initial impulse had been to intervene, to protect her comrade. But as she watched Theo tend to the injured scout, her anger gave way to confusion, and something deeper, something she couldn't name. Compassion? Empathy? Whatever it was, it unsettled her. Later, as night fell over the battlefield, Vera confronted Theo. She emerged silently from the darkness, her presence announced only by the soft crunch of gravel beneath her boots. Theo looked up, unsurprised but wary. "You spared them," she stated, her tone unreadable. "He wasn't armed," Theo replied simply. "And he had a kid waiting for him. What was I supposed to do?" Vera studied him, her violet eyes searching his face for deceit or ulterior motives. Finding none, she exhaled sharply, her shoulders relaxing ever so slightly. "You are unusual, Theo Wren." "Thanks, I think," he said with a wry smile. "Care to return the favor someday?" Her lips twitched, almost forming a smile before she caught herself. "Do not mistake kindness for weakness," she warned, though the edge in her voice was dulled. "War changes everyone. Even you." "And even you," Theo countered, meeting her gaze steadily. "Don't pretend you're immune to it." For the first time, Vera found herself unable to argue. Instead, she turned away, her silhouette blending seamlessly with the starlit horizon. But before disappearing entirely, she paused, glancing over her shoulder. "The next time we meet," she said, her voice softer than before, "do not expect leniency." "Wouldn't dream of it," Theo replied, watching her vanish into the night. The days that followed were a blur of tension and uneasy alliances. The human forces, battered but not broken, regrouped in a makeshift base carved into the rocky terrain of Zytherian's moon. Theo took charge, his natural charisma and unorthodox leadership style earning him both respect and skepticism from his fellow soldiers. Despite their losses, morale remained surprisingly high, a testament to Theo's ability to inspire hope even in the bleakest of situations. Meanwhile, Vera returned to her own camp, where she faced a storm of questions from her subordinates. News of her encounter with Theo, and the scout he had saved, spread quickly among the Zytherian ranks. Some viewed her actions as a sign of weakness, others saw it as proof that humanity might possess qualities worth understanding. Vera silenced the dissenters with a single icy glare, but privately, she wrestled with doubts she hadn't felt in decades. What was it about this human that unsettled her so deeply? Their paths crossed again sooner than either anticipated. A massive sandstorm swept across the moon, forcing both sides to seek shelter in an ancient, abandoned temple buried beneath the surface. Neither group knew the other was there until they stumbled upon each other in the labyrinthine corridors. Weapons drawn, they faced off in the dim light of flickering energy crystals embedded in the walls. "Stand down," Vera commanded, her voice cutting through the tense silence. Her warriors hesitated, glancing at her for confirmation. She stepped forward, lowering her weapon slightly. "This is neutral ground." Theo raised an eyebrow, his rifle still aimed squarely at her chest. "Neutral? Since when do you play fair?" "Since survival became more important than pride," she shot back, her tone sharp but lacking its usual venom. "The storm will last for hours. Fighting here serves no purpose." He considered her words, then lowered his weapon cautiously. "Fine. But if anyone tries anything, you'll be the first to know," she finished dryly, gesturing for her troops to stand down as well. The two groups eyed each other warily, forming loose clusters on opposite ends of the chamber. As the storm raged outside, an uneasy truce settled over the temple. Both sides tended to their wounded, their movements deliberate and measured to avoid provoking the other. Theo wandered among his men, offering words of encouragement and cracking jokes to lighten the mood. When he noticed one of the Zytherians struggling to stabilize an injured comrade, he hesitated, torn between distrust and instinct. "Need a hand?" he asked finally, crouching beside the alien warrior. The Zytherian glanced up, startled, before nodding gruffly. Together, they worked to patch up the injured soldier, their shared focus creating a fragile bridge of understanding. Watching from a distance, Vera felt a pang of something unfamiliar, gratitude perhaps, or admiration. She couldn't decide which unnerved her more. Hours passed, and the storm showed no signs of abating. In the central chamber, Theo found himself sitting cross-legged on the floor, tinkering with a damaged communication device. Vera approached silently, her boots making barely a sound against the stone. "What are you doing?" she asked, her tone curious despite herself. "Trying to fix this thing," he replied without looking up. Might come in handy if we need to call for backup, or negotiate peace talks. She snorted softly, folding her arms across her chest. Peace? From you? Hey, I'm full of surprises, he quipped, flashing her a grin. Besides, someone's gotta try, right? Her expression softened, just for a moment. You truly believe that, don't you? That peace is possible. I have to, he admitted, his smile fading as he set the device aside. Otherwise, what's the point of all this? If we're just fighting to fight, then we've already lost. Vera sank onto the floor beside him, her violet eyes tracing the intricate carvings on the temple walls. My people, we were once like yours. Curious, exploratory. But wars change everything. They strip away innocence and replace it with scars. And yet here we are, Theo said quietly, still trying to make sense of it all. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the weight of their shared burdens hanging heavy in the air. For the first time, Veria allowed herself to imagine a different future, one where humans and Zytherians weren't locked in endless conflict. It was a dangerous thought, one she knew could get her exiled, or worse, if discovered. But the seed had been planted, and she couldn't ignore it. When the storm finally subsided, the two groups emerged from the temple, blinking in the harsh sunlight. Though neither side voiced it aloud, the brief period of cooperation had left its mark. As they prepared to part ways, Theo turned to Vera, extending a hand. Until next time, Commander, he said, his tone light-hearted but sincere. She stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment before clasping it firmly. Until then, Theo Wren. But as they walked away in opposite directions, both knew the fragile truce wouldn't last. Back in their respective camps, whispers of betrayal began to swirl. Among the humans, some accused Theo of fraternizing with the enemy. Among the Zytherians, Vera faced accusations of losing sight of her duty. Tension simmered, threatening to boil over at any moment. Unbeknownst to either leader, a third faction had been watching from the shadows. A rogue syndicate known as the Obsidian Claw, notorious for exploiting galactic conflicts for profit, saw an opportunity to manipulate the chaos to their advantage. Their leader, a cunning operative named Kaylee's Draven, dispatched spies to infiltrate both camps, sowing discord and misinformation. Whispers of secret negotiations reached the ears of hot-headed soldiers on both sides, fueling paranoia and distrust. One evening, as Theo reviewed intel reports in his tent, Reyes burst in, her face pale. Captain, we intercepted a transmission. Someone's leaking info about our movements, to the Zytherians. Theo frowned, his mind racing. Are you sure? Could it be one of ours? It's possible, she admitted reluctantly. But it's also possible they've got someone inside too. Before Theo could respond, an explosion rocked the camp, sending debris flying in all directions. Chaos erupted as Zytherian fighters descended, their weapons blazing. Theo grabbed his rifle, shouting orders as he rushed toward the front lines. Amidst the confusion, he spotted Vera leading the charge, her expression grim and resolute. What the hell is going on? He demanded, grabbing her arm as she passed. We received intel that your forces were planning an ambush, she snapped, shrugging him off. I didn't want to believe it, but... Someone's playing us, Theo interrupted, his voice low and urgent. This isn't coincidence. Realization dawned in Vera's eyes, but before she could respond, a sniper's shot rang out, narrowly missing them both. They dove for cover together, exchanging a glance that spoke volumes. Whatever trust they'd built was hanging by a thread, and the real enemy was still out there, pulling the strings. The realization hit them both like a thunderclap. Someone was orchestrating this chaos, manipulating their fears and suspicions to drive them further apart. As the battle raged around them, Theo and Vera crouched behind a crumbling barricade, their breaths ragged but synchronized. We need to stop this, Theo said urgently, glancing at her. If we keep fighting each other, we're just playing into their hands. Vera's jaw tightened as she scanned the battlefield, her glowing eyes narrowing with determination. Agreed. But how do we convince our people to stand down when they're already convinced betrayal is on both sides? Theo hesitated, his mind racing. Then it came to him, a risky plan, but one that might work if they acted quickly. We create a diversion. Something big enough to draw attention away from the fighting and give us time to expose whoever's behind this. Her gaze snapped to his, sharp and calculating. What kind of diversion? He grinned despite the gravity of the situation. Leave that part to me. Moments later, Theo sprinted toward the center of the battlefield, dodging plasma bolts and shouting orders to his troops. Fall back. Regroup at the eastern ridge. His voice carried authority, even over the din of explosions. To his relief, most of the human soldiers obeyed, retreating in an orderly fashion while laying down covering fire. Meanwhile, Vera barked commands to her warriors, ordering them to form a defensive perimeter rather than pressing the attack. Though some hesitated, unsure why their commander had suddenly shifted tactics, discipline won out, and they complied. Once the two forces had disengaged slightly, Theo reached into his pack and pulled out a small device he'd been tinkering with earlier, the damaged communication unit he'd repaired during the sandstorm. With a flick of a switch, the device emitted a high-pitched frequency that disrupted the energy weapons of both sides. Bolts of plasma fizzled mid-air, leaving stunned silence in their wake. What have you done? Vera demanded, striding up to him as the battlefield fell eerily quiet. Bought us 5 minutes, he replied, tossing the now useless device aside. Now let's find who's really pulling the strings. Together, they moved through the wreckage, searching for clues. It didn't take long to spot something amiss, a group of shadowy figures slipping away from the fray, their movements furtive and deliberate. Theo recognized one of them immediately, Kaylee's Draven, the Obsidian Claw operative whose reputation preceded him. There! Theo shouted, pointing. Without hesitation, Vera took off after them, her speed unmatched. Theo followed close behind, weaving through debris and dodging stray shots fired by confused soldiers. The chase led them deep into the ruins of an ancient Scytherian outpost, its crumbling halls echoing with the sound of their footsteps. Draven and his cohorts ducked into a hidden chamber, sealing the entrance behind them. By the time Theo and Vera arrived, the door was locked tight. But Vera wasn't deterred. With a powerful kick, she shattered the reinforced paneling, revealing the conspirators inside. Well, Draven sneered, raising his hands mockingly. Looks like the human and the alien decided to play nice after all. Cut the crap, Theo growled, leveling his rifle at the man. Why are you doing this? What do you gain from pitting us against each other? Draven smirked, leaning casually against a console filled with holographic displays. Money, power, influence. It's always the same story, isn't it? Your war keeps my coffers full, and your hatred ensures I stay relevant. Why fix what isn't broken? Vera stepped forward, her blade gleaming ominously in the dim light. Your games end here. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Draven's face. He glanced at his henchmen, who were visibly shaken by the sight of the legendary warrior. You wouldn't dare kill me, he stammered. I'm too valuable. Too connected. You overestimate your importance, Vera replied coldly, and underestimate ours. Before anyone could react, Theo lunged forward, tackling Draven to the ground. The two men grappled fiercely, exchanging blows as Vera disabled the remaining operatives with swift, precise strikes. Finally, Theo pinned Draven down, holding his rifle inches from the man's face. This ends now, Theo snarled. Call off your mercenaries, or I swear. You'll do nothing, Draven spat, though his bravado was faltering. You don't have the guts. But he underestimated the resolve of those standing before him. Vera activated the communication system on Draven's console, broadcasting a message directly to his network. Attention, Obsidian Claw operatives, she announced, her voice commanding and clear. Your leader has been compromised. Stand down immediately, or face annihilation. The effect was instantaneous. Across the battlefield, the Rogue Syndicate's agents began surrendering en masse, abandoning their posts and weapons. Without their leader's guidance, their carefully constructed web of deceit unraveled. Back in the chamber, Draven slumped in defeat, his arrogance replaced by fear. You'll regret this, he muttered bitterly. No, Theo said firmly, hauling him to his feet. What we'll regret is letting scum like you divide us for so long. In the days that followed, the human and Scytherian forces worked together to dismantle the remnants of the Obsidian Claw's operation. Trust was slow to rebuild, but small gestures, a shared meal, a joint patrol, a moment of laughter, began to mend the rift between them. Theo and Vera found themselves meeting frequently, discussing strategies and sharing stories. Their bond, forged in the crucible of conflict, grew stronger with each passing day. Though neither openly admitted it, there was an unspoken understanding between them, a belief that peace, however distant, was worth fighting for. One evening, as twin suns set over the horizon, casting the moon in hues of gold and crimson, Theo approached Vera where she stood overlooking the landscape. She turned to him, her violet eyes reflecting the fading light. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. He smiled, shrugging slightly. "We keep going. One step at a time." She nodded, a rare smile softening her features. Perhaps there is hope after all. As they stood side by side, silhouetted against the sky, the weight of war seemed lighter. For the first time, they dared to imagine a future free of bloodshed. And in that moment, anything felt possible.